Hi, this is Ms. Schnettler, and this is Introduction to Isometric Drawing. Please don't mind the bearded dragons in the background if you can hear them. So with isometric drawing, you're going to use isometric paper like this. This is a little bit on the fancier side of isometric paper. You can also print some out from the internet. That's absolutely fine. So this has blue lines so that any ink or pencil lead that you use stands out and your drawing stands out from the background. But you can use isometric paper printed from online just fine. And sometimes it even comes in dot paper, but I find the dots to be a little extra confusing. So we stick with the triangle. But if you're having a hard time, dot paper could be something to try. So the first thing is to make sure your isometric paper is facing the right way. In this case, when I have a whole sheet, it's easy to tell because there's writing down here from the publisher. And so I know that that's going to be the way to orient my paper. If you weren't sure, it can really mess up your drawing if you have the paper facing the wrong way before you get started. So I'm going to teach you my trick for making sure your paper is facing the right way. So you want to find two triangles where the base of the triangle is touching another base of a triangle, and see if you can draw it horizontally. If you can get a sideways diamond, you have the paper facing the correct way. You can make it extra silly. I like to do that. And make a duck. And if you can see the duck, then you have the paper facing the right way. So let me show you. If I turn the paper this way, I can get a diamond facing that direction. I can get a diamond facing that direction. I can get one facing this direction, but I can't get one going all the way straight across. So no matter what I get, I'm going to get a wonky duck, and we don't want that. We want a straight up and down duck. Once you know your paper is facing the correct way, and again, that's a useful tip because sometimes you don't get a full sheet of paper. Sometimes you get part of a piece of paper that's been cut out, or you might have a different brand that doesn't write on the bottom. So you always want to make sure that your isometric graph paper is facing the correct direction. Then, if you've never seen this kind of paper before, when I grew up, my dad was an engineer, and so he would bring this kind of paper home for me to play with, so I was kind of familiar with it. But if you aren't, that's totally okay. Most people have never seen this paper. You might want to just take a little, not a whole bunch of the paper, just a little part of it, to just kind of practice staying on the little blue lines. You can go right past your duck if you like, and just kind of practice drawing on the blue lines. You don't ever want to draw between them. You want to draw right on them. So don't, again, take very much space, but that might be a good exercise, especially if you're looking at these triangles and feeling a little overwhelmed. Just try following some of the lines and make sure you're staying on the blue line. That can be a really good beginner exercise. So the next thing we're going to work on is how to draw shapes. So we're going to use these cubes a lot in this class. And I've taken one cube and I've painted on it so that we can use it for some examples. So we're going to use it for this first example. So when you're drawing isometrically, you're not drawing straight up from down or straight from the front. You're actually drawing kind of on an angle. So let me see if I can get this just like that, where the front, the right, and the top are equal. And that can be a little weird. And you can see I've painted one side of this red cube white, painted another side gold, and I've made a little dot down here, and that's going to help us as we are beginners getting through this. You are absolutely allowed to mark on the cubes if you need to. Not a problem. There are a number of different ways that you can go about drawing an isometric cube on isometric paper. I'm going to show you a particular process that I have developed after teaching students how to draw isometrically for a few years. It doesn't mean it's the only way. It just means it's the way that works best for most people. There are some other ways, and I'll show you those later. So what I typically do is I find a spot, make sure I can visualize in my mind my duck. If I can't, go ahead and draw it. It's okay. Then I'm going to draw a dot. And that's going to represent the dot on the front of my cube. So when we talk isometrically, this is the front, this is the top, and this is the right side. So that dot is right in the middle. And on the isometric paper, you can't really draw flat across if you're drawing on the blue lines, which you should always do. So I'm going to draw that front edge and the right edge. Notice I'm using 1, 2 triangles as my distance because drawing bigger is going to be a little bit easier on this, and later on in our course it's going to be necessary. So I really want you to practice drawing a cube that is 2 triangles wide on each direction. So again, if you can't see it, let me draw it really quickly for you. So there's 2 triangles there, and there's 2 triangles there. All right, now that we have this part of the cube, we're going to go up in height. And to do that, we're going to go vertically straight up on the paper. 1, 2 triangles, 1, 2 triangles. And that's going to give us the height of the cube. The next step is to draw the front edge at the top and the right edge at the top. And then this is usually when the magic happens. We draw the 2 edges on the back of the top of the cube. And then there's our cube. I'm going to do this a few more times for you. Of course, this is a video, so you can always go back and rewind, but it's also an introduction video, so I want to show you how to do this a few times. So again, I find a spot, I make a dot. I'm going to draw my front lines, and they go up diagonally just a little bit because there are no horizontal lines on an isometric. Then I'm going to go up in height. Notice I'm keeping all of my drawing lines on the blue lines. Again, also I'm drawing in a pen that's erasable. I highly suggest if you don't have an erasable pen that you use pencil. Pencil just doesn't show very well on camera, but it's what I use when I'm drawing normally. Another thing that can sometimes bother students is the fact when you go across here, it's not all even, but remember we're looking at it in that isometric view where things look a little bit differently. So that's okay. And like I said, some of you are going to grab this after the first time you try it. Most of you are going to need a little bit of practice, and some of you are going to need a little bit more, and that's just normal. That's just how people work. So I'm going to do another cube. I'm going to start with my dot. I'm going to draw the front, the right side bottoms, go up 1, 2 triangles, 1, 2 triangles, 1, 2 triangles, and draw my top edge. Now, if you try this and you try it and you try it and it doesn't work for you, you can draw from the top down. It just doesn't work for most people, but for the people it works for, it really works for them. And that would be just kind of the opposite. You would draw a dot, and then you would draw the top edges. You would go down. Like that. You could also draw a large diamond and then come down from that. I do think down the road that there are a couple of difficulties that will come with the top-down method when you're drawing larger shapes that have multiple cubes connected. But again, if you're really struggling and that's what works for you, then that's what works for you, and we'll get around the rest. All right, I'm going to draw that step out one more time just so you can see it's a dot. So then it's a dot with 2 lines. And then it's a dot with 2 lines and lines coming up. Oh, that's too close. Also, sometimes when you're first starting out, you will draw shapes and they'll run into each other. That's okay. It's not a big deal. I just don't want to show you that when I'm showing you how to do it. There we go. So it's basically step 1, step 2, 3, 4, and 5 to drawing a cube. At this point, if you're feeling really stuck, I would suggest going back and watching me draw the cubes a few times and just practice from there. Don't feel stressed about being able to move on any further. I do also want to show you a couple of common mistakes that students will make when making a cube. The first one is not counting. So they might make it 1 on one side, 2 on another, which you'll still get a shape, it's just not going to be a cube. So, and I think what commonly happens more is to try to make it feel even, so that it looks more even, but this is 1, 2 triangles, 1, 2 triangles, and this is 1, 2, 3 triangles, and then that gets you into a whole mess of trouble. So especially while you're beginning, make sure you're counting how many triangles you're going up until your brain and your hand kind of get used to what that looks like, because it is different than regular drawing. Another thing that students will want to do, and I totally understand this, is they will want to turn these solid cubes, again, they represent these. I know you can see through these a little bit, but not much. It's either representing a solid cube that you cannot see through. What I find students will want to do is they will want to draw every single line of the cube, and that can turn it into, if you're looking at it the correct way, it'll look kind of like an ice cube or a glass cube, but it can also just look like 6 triangles stuck together in a hexagon. And that gets more confusing when you draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more than one cube on top of each other, which we will discuss a little bit later in this video. Again, that's how I would want a stack of cubes to be drawn. And the reason I don't want you to draw ice cubes or glass cubes is because once you have all of those cubes stacked on top of each other, it gets really hard to tell the different cubes apart from each other. So another thing, if you're having a hard time with these, some students will just kind of gently shade in the front of the cube with a pen or a pencil, and it just makes it feel to them a little bit more 3D, and that's totally fine. Not a problem with that. So the last thing we're going to work on here is drawing more than one cube. So what happens if we add cubes on to our red cube? The white for the front and the gold for the right side and the dot in the middle to help us get started. So I'm still going to draw with a dot, and I'm going to focus on my red cube first. And the reason I also suggest you work with multiple colors of cubes is because then you can do something like label this one the red cube. Then we can see that the yellow one is next to it. So we're going to follow that same line. There's no gap. I can run my pencil or my pen straight across that. Come up, add the top, and there's my yellow cube. Do the same for the blue on the other side. Again, they're right smooth like that. And I can use lines from the original cube to help me out, because in isometric drawings, all of your lines are parallel. That's that word in math, which means that the lines never intersect. And of course, these ones are intersecting, but it means like all of these vertical lines are parallel, all of these diagonal lines are parallel. And that's how we draw that multiple shape. What if we added height and we add a cube? Okay, this can get a little bit trickier, but it's still very doable. I'm going to always start off with that dot. And I've got my red cube. I always also, and it's just a personal thing, I find it is a lot easier to start from the front bottom of the shape and draw my way up and backwards. Other people find a different order works better, but that's what I'm going to show you because that's what makes sense to me. Whatever process you end up deciding to use, just make sure that you are consistent about it. Okay, so this is my red cube. And I can see the top of my red cube, so I'm going to draw the top of my red cube. And I can see my blue cube. And I can see the top of my blue cube, so I'm going to draw the top of my blue cube. Ooh, I forgot to label that one. Now, when I come over here, again, let me hold this a little bit more like how you would see it isometrically. I can see that the yellow cube is still there. and I can see the front of that cube. However, because the orange cube is now on top, I can no longer see the top of the yellow cube. So instead of drawing the top of the yellow, I'm going to continue up, draw the sides of the orange, oh, forgot to label that, and the top of the orange. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to draw shapes that have multiple cubes and cubes of different heights in the next video, but I did want to go ahead and address it. All right, I hope that helps. Thank you.